Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Hello.
Season 5, episode 44 today, and Austin, the Steelers season has come to a dramatic and extremely disappointing end at the hands of the Cleveland Browns, a game that snowballed out of the Steelers' hands right away from the very first snap of the game to the end of the first quarter. The Steelers were in catch-up mode the entire way, and one of the most bizarre playoff collapses we've seen from the Steelers, as bad as we've ever seen, really, well, since the last playoff game they played against the Jacksonville Jaguars. A 28-0 deficit the Steelers faced at the end of the first quarter, and they clawed their way back at points, but the deficit was just way too much for them, and they ended up making it an 11-point loss, score of 48-37, but really that game was decided when the first quarter ended.
The game was basically already over by the first quarter. I mean, you're down 28-0 so quick. It's so hard to come back from down 28. The Steelers were, by the end of this quarter, already had to make the second biggest comeback in NFL history in a playoff game, which we actually saw in the playoffs not too long ago. Colts Chiefs, I remember that. One of the biggest comeback ever, but they were already going to have to front, basically NFL history after the first quarter.
Yeah, and we'll try to keep things as far as the scope goes of just this game and not so much big picture at the moment. But the way you gotta kind of have to look at this is just the way things snowballed right from the start when it comes to this game. One play into the game, this game had very similar vibes to Super Bowl 48, 48 between the Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks. One play into the game, and you have a score for the defensive team. That was, obviously, we've been talking about Maurkice Pouncey and his issues with snapping the ball for years now. He's been one of the worst centers in the league when it comes to the shotgun snap. And given that the Steelers run shotgun so much, and you couple that with how bad he's been at it, it's maybe not all that surprising that he struggled with it so much. 6 fumbles the last 2 seasons caused by an aborted snap where he has been unable to get the ball to the quarterback. Ben Roethlisberger has covered up a lot of those issues in the past, but this time the snap went right over Ben's head, and him and James Conner kind of exchange a I got it, you got it type of scenario, and neither of them get the ball, and there's 4 Browns there to recover it when either one of them probably should have been able to get that.
Yeah, it was just a bad play. Brown that started off terrible. I mean, I can't believe that snap went backwards 20 yards, because that's literally what happened. It went like 20 yards to get there. Just really poor play from everyone. I mean, really, it's on Pouncey, but also Ben and Connor not being able to jump on it, recover it before it got into the end zone is just as bad. It could have at least been a difference of 7 points. It could have at least been safety instead. It was a swing of 5 points.
And let's
7, really.
Let's also mention that Pouncey was trying to get to his assigned block a little bit earlier, and starting next to him at left guard was Matt Filer, not Kevin Dotson. A bit of a surprise there, given the way that Dotson had played in Filer's absence. Just as getting back to a little bit of a housekeeping thing here, I was a little disappointed to see that Dotson didn't get the opportunity to start. And although Filer had 2 penalties that weren't necessarily his fault, I really wasn't happy that he got the start over a guy like Dotson that I thought had performed well enough and earned that job.
Yeah, it felt like Dotson was a little bit better than Filer in absence, but it was a bit of a surprise seeing Filer in there because of that. I mean, I guess, I don't know if it was necessarily a mistake for this team, because I can't really say I have many complaints about Filer, but I think maybe in the old grand scheme of things, it was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between either of those guys playing won't make a big difference one way or another. But bottom line is, one play into the game, you're down 7-0. And, at that point, you've got you don't have a great feeling about how things are going. You're already thinking, oh, it's going to be one of those games. The Steelers aren't going to be able to win this by 10 points unless if they really turn it around here. They get the ball back. And mind you, the Browns are, just a reminder, they're shorthanded. They don't have their coach. They are getting their acting head coach in this game is their special teams coordinator, and their offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, is calling plays for the first time all year. They don't have a number of players due to COVID-19, including guys like Denzel Ward. And the Steelers were already down 7-0. They get the ball back. They convert a nice 3rd and 1 with Derek Watt. And then right after that play, by the way, Watt's first carry of the year, which I've been calling for a while, they finally get a 3rd down and short conversion with him. And the very next play, Ben Roethlisberger makes an ill-advised decision, scrambling out of the pocket, lofts the ball in the area for Benny Snell, which is picked off by MJ Stewart. Not a good decision for Ben at all. There were 2 receivers in Snell and McDonald in the area, so clearly there was some sort of miscommunication between what the 2 of those guys were doing, and just an ugly, ugly play all around, and just a situation where you can't have your quarterback killing your team when they need to get something going right away. That was just we already know that the snowball started rolling downhill with the Pouncey snap, but this was just a horrible way to come back for the offense.
And funny enough, Marquise Pouncey was the one that MJ scored on that play. But yeah, it was bad. The Steelers were actually kind of getting down the field. They were at their own 48, I believe, and it got intercepted at the 49. But a bad decision by Ben, and it helped add to the hole that was the first quarter.
Yeah, so 2 offensive drives and 2 turnovers on 7 plays. They had gotten 2 first downs on that last drive, but obviously you're not going to be happy about turning the ball over twice on 2 drives. And the defense first got on the field. They had a chance to maybe bail the offense out, but they were unable to do either of that. A 3-play drive where Baker Mayfield dumped a short 3rd and 4 slant to Jarvis Landry, and he runs right past Terrell Edmonds, who we had given a lot of credit for this year in terms of being a much better sure-handed tackler. And he provided one of 2 horrible whiffs on the day, an absolute stunningly bad angle and attempt at a tackle, and Landry races right past him for another touchdown, and then it's 14-0, and now you're like, oh boy, here we go. This could be really bad. The defense all year, the last 2 years, it's been what's supposed to be an elite unit. It's supposed to be a unit that can cover up deficiencies when the offense has put them in into some holes, into some bad situations. And in this game, we saw that they weren't able to do anything of the sort. In fact, it was one of the worst, it was actually the worst defensive game from a Steelers team in the playoffs ever, as a matter of fact. And this started it all.
Yeah, they gave up the most points by the defense of any Steelers team to make the playoffs ever. Like, it was the most points given up by the team. It was really, really bad. And we've seen some really, really bad defenses. The 2015 defense made it to the playoffs. That defense was awful and never gave up that many points. Just really, really bad. I honestly, just the scope of the game, I was more disappointed with the defense than the offense, because you look at it, and the defense basically gave up 41 points in this game, and that is not okay from a team that is, like you said, supposed to be one of the best in the NFL, one of the better ones. Like, the offense is, there's tons of blame, and they all obviously did their part in losing this game, but the defense almost never showed up in this game. They showed up when they forced 2, like in the second quarter. The offense basically, the second half, showed up in almost the entire second half. And almost the Steelers back into this game, but they were unable to keep up. The defense never did its job other than most outs. They never forced a turnover. There's no sack in this game. It's just, all in all, it's just bad from them. But back to what we were talking about. I'm sorry I got off topic. I wanted to say that talking about the 3-play touchdown, they did not even make the Browns work for it. It was quick. It was literally 1-6 straight for I really don't understand exactly what happened. You got like one wide receiver to address, and that's Jarvis Landry. You have to watch out for Jarvis Landry, and he was able to go. Terrell Edmonds' missed tackle is just able to run all the way for a 40-yard touchdown. That can happen.
Yeah, it was, things that we saw in this game. The Steelers actually won the explosive play battle from a pure 20-yard gain standpoint. They had more 20-yard plays of 20 yards or more in this game. But what happened on the other end was, of those Browns explosive plays, they had several that were double explosive plays. So not only can you not give up explosive plays, Austin, you can't give up double explosive plays. And on top of that, you can't let those guys then get into the end zone. And the Steelers did all of that several times. Like, it was just awful on every sort of level that you could imagine. And it started with that 40-yard touchdown, and it happened before they even knew it was going on. And I don't know, just slow starts have been in the offense's nature, like you said. The offense and defense worked together to kind of dig themselves this hole, but it felt like the offense was doing more after the first quarter to get them out of that hole, where the defense was just kind of the dead weight.
Yeah, and that's crazy to say. Like, the 4 turnovers from the offense is unacceptable as well, but they were able to still get 37 points despite 4 turnovers. That's almost impressive, honestly. To have 4 turnovers and still 37 points.
5 turnovers.
5 turnovers. 5 turnovers. Forgot about the 5th.
Makes it a little more impressive.
Yeah, I was not. I'm thinking 4 interceptions. I'm not counting. I was not counting the Marquise Pouncey fumble. So 5 turnovers and still able to score 37 points. They're able to battle back. Like I said, the best thing the defense was able to do was force 2 straight 3-and-outs second quarter, but they didn't have an explosive play on defense. They didn't get that turnover. They didn't get a sack. They weren't getting pressure at all. I think that was like the worst part of it. We were talking about how you get 2 All-Pros back against a line that was messed up. Not only was it messed up, they lost Jack Conklin in this game. So now you have Jack Conklin out, you have your All-Pro guard, Joel Toney out, you have Kendall Lamb starting there, and you're getting no pressure. Absolutely none. It was ridiculous. Absolutely awful.
And not to mention, Michael Dunn, is that the left guard's name?
Yes.
He left mid-game, and the guy that replaced him is a guy that had to introduce himself to Baker Mayfield in the locker room before the game. So you had guys that weren't even known to the offensive staff that were just dominating here, and it was just embarrassing to see. But let's get back to the task at hand here. So the offense in a 14-0 hole had moved the ball a little bit successfully. They get the ball back and immediately go 3-and-out. A 3rd and 1, which we saw the Steelers run the exact same play to Derek Watt that they had run before. The defense, predictably seeing it for the second time, same motion, same setup, same everything, running to the same hole, was too predictable, and Coach Randy gets a lot of crap for that, but in this instance, he was right to get that criticism, as Watt was stuffed for no gain, and the Steelers at their own 35 had to punt again, and again, the Browns go right down the field from their own 35 in just 6 plays, almost exclusively from the running game, and this is where you started to feel really uneasy because the Browns were just destroying the Steelers on the ground. The first 2 gains on the drive were 17 and 20 yards alone, and then Kareem Hunt just carries Robert Spillane into the end zone on that touchdown. That was when I was starting to get more disgusted. More than this bad snap, more than the interception, more than the missed tackle. I was most upset about watching how physical the Browns were on that drive and just watching the Steelers basically getting thrown out of the club. It was a very embarrassing situation at that point. That drive was just ugly to watch if you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah, not to mention the punt leading into that was bad as well. It was only 38 yards, and they got started the Cleveland 35. And I mean, when you're punting from Pittsburgh 35, you want more than a 38-yard punt. At least put them a little bit deeper than start, like maybe inside the. I don't know. But yeah, that whole defensive drive after that was just awful. The Browns having their way with Steelers, there was nothing that they could do. The Chubb was running. They were getting Nick Chubb was really running. That was really what happened in this entire game. But they were able to have whatever they wanted, and it was just there's nothing they could do to stop it. It was just really bad. Even on Nick Chubb's 20-yard gain, like the Steelers had him stopped, and then he just gets out to the left and then was able to rush for big 20-yard gain. It was just all in all really, really bad, and they got it so easily. And then the Kareem Hunt touchdown, same thing. There was no toughness to the team. They were soft.
Yeah, so you brought up something I wanted to mention. So a few weeks ago in that Colts game, I was calling the team soft and whatnot, and people have been calling the Steelers soft for a little while now. And for the second half of that Colts game, I had to eat my words. But besides that second half, the Steelers have been playing soft football for the better part of 2 months now. And we can address that like in a bigger picture later. But the fact of the matter is you've got a line, like you said, with guys like Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Tyson Alualu, TJ Watt. These guys are supposed to be big, tough guys. Avery Williamson, Vince Williams, Robert Spillane. These guys are supposed to be carrying the torch of big-time Steelers, physical defenders, and they got moved around, and it was really just disheartening to see. And we've been calling the offensive line soft for a little while in terms of their run blocking because it has been awful. But this is just something, I could have seen the Steelers losing this game. The most embarrassing part about this game, even ahead of the turnovers, like I was saying, in my opinion, was just the way that they were getting physically destroyed. That's just hard to watch if you're any team, but especially if you're supposed to be a proud franchise like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And just their performance in this instance, especially on the defensive side, was nowhere close to where you wanted it to be. And that Kareem Hunt touchdown was a perfect example of that. And I didn't have any hope after that touchdown. And the Steelers getting the ball back again in a situation where they had an opportunity to move the ball just a little bit. And Ben Roethlisberger has his second pass off the fingertips of Deontay Johnson and picked off by Sheldrick Redwine, who returns it near inside the Steelers' red zone, a big return. And at that point, you already knew it was going to happen. Just 3 plays later, Kareem Hunt walks in for a second touchdown. And just like that, with still 2 minutes to go in the first quarter, it was 28-0. It was like it was Murphy's Law with the Steelers in the first quarter. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and no one did anything to try to dig them out. They were collectively digging their own graves in this one. I took nothing positive away from that sequence.
Yeah, no, there was absolutely nothing good about that entire first quarter. Nothing even started to get even decent until the second quarter, and it was nothing great there either.
I'd say the only positive play you can take from that entire quarter was a Derek Watt first down run.
Literally. It's literally the only thing that came out of it, and then they tried it again just because it worked once.
Which is nuts, because you think about it, they're missing all those people on the back end. The first time, I love it. Like, I was all about it the first time, just because I feel like they should have called that play a number of times all year, because for some reason Derek Watt is not allowed to have the ball in his hands, and it worked. But there's a difference between running a fullback play again and running literally the exact same thing a second time. I was not a fan of that. But yeah, so you end the first quarter, and it's almost like you haven't even started the game. It's like all of a sudden you're down 28-0, and you got to get back to work. And it's like the game was already over at that point. But, the Steelers still have 3 quarters of ball to play. They had actually started to move the ball just a little bit prior to the start of the second quarter. They start moving the ball a little bit downfield. They get into Cleveland territory. The drive stalls out. It's a 4th and 9 at the Cleveland 38. I was screaming at my TV when this was happening, Austin. I'm sure you were too. A lot of fans have issues with this. Understandably so. Had the score been tied, whatever. If it's 4th and 9, you punt there, right? Or you come up with something. Maybe you try a long field goal. What is the gain to punting from the Cleveland 38 when you are down 28-0? I know this speaks to a larger theme of Mike Tomlin living in his fears, but in this situation, let's just stick to this situation in the moment. What in the world was he thinking? Like, what could possibly have been gained from this decision?
I have no idea. The analytics say no. The brain says I have no idea. It's literally 28-0. You're already in the biggest hole you could be. What are you scared of? Going down 35-0 by the end of the first quarter? If you don't get it, you need to go for that. Or just draw them off sides or anything. Just try so you can get something so you get your team going. Absolutely awful. It was such a painful punt. It was in the top percentile of wussy punts. I forget what the actual term is. But,
it's the surrender index on Twitter. Great Twitter account, by the way. Check it out.
Yes. Yeah. So it was in the top 99.8% of surrendering punts of this season. It was terrible because you're down 28-0. You got nothing to lose. Look, you're basically already lost. This team is down unless they start getting something going fast. You have to make the second big tie for the second biggest comeback in NFL history. At this point, there's no reason to punt. And then on top of it, it was just it's just awful, just awful. Really, really bad play calling.
And let's be honest here. The moment it becomes 28-0, whether it's the first quarter or if it's the fourth quarter, the enemy is no longer the Browns necessarily. It's the clock. You're now playing against the clock. If you play the game long enough, eventually you'd like to think, based on the way the things were going, that the Steelers might have had an opportunity, but you just run out of time. That's the way it always works in these games. You have a clock. You only have a certain amount of time. When you lose a full quarter and you go down 28 points, the only way to win is to score and score quickly. And as we'll see later, the Steelers were able to kind of work their way out of it a bit. But, excluding just the defensive failures, if the Steelers score a touchdown there, it doesn't win them the game. They probably still lose. But if the Steelers score there, you look at the Browns' next drive anyways, they went 3-and-out and didn't gain any yards. If the Steelers had been able to get a 3-and-out after scoring, maybe things play out a little differently. But instead, the worst thing is, not only is the fact that you're punting, you're waving the white flag, the worst part about it, besides that, in my opinion, is the fact that you get a net of just 28 yards. I mean, the Browns made that up in X number of plays on the entire day. They had several plays that went longer than that. And, all they have to do is get 2 first downs, and they've basically made up that entire difference. Just because the Browns went 3-and-out on that next drive does not make that the right decision at all. Again, it's different if you're down, if you're down 10 or you're down 7 points or it's tied or you're winning. Punting in that situation absolutely cannot happen. I can't fathom or understand why Mike Tomlin has gone from the we don't live in our fears person to someone that does live in his fears. Like you said, you're afraid of the Browns going up 35-0. If you punt it back to them, based on the way that your defense had played to that point, it's probably going to happen anyways. So what's the difference?
Yeah, it was just delaying it. Just bad play calling in general. And surprisingly, this wasn't even the worst punt of the game. That the worst decision to punt in this game, in my opinion. I think we will disagree on that. But
no. I just wanted to preface that in saying that I've thought about it more, and I was kind of just thinking about, my thought at the time was the whole field position thing. But I had to keep remembering that it's no longer a field position game that late in the game when you're down by that much. So I'll say that I was wrong with my initial thought of it, but I'm also not a head coach of a team in that situation, So I'm willing to admit that I was wrong about that. So, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So, the Browns do go 3-and-out, like we said. And the Steelers, having punted on their last drive from good field position, get the ball back at their own 46. And immediately on a 3rd and 2, because the Steelers have been throwing short all year, eventually a Ben Roethlisberger pass gets tipped up into the air and is intercepted on a fantastic individual effort by Porter Gustin, a guy I looked at a couple years ago coming out for the draft. I don't know, this just felt like everything, just the crap hitting the fan again. I wasn't so much mad about just the way it was. This was as much everything going wrong for the Steelers as much as it was everything going around well for the Browns as well. This was just an unbelievable athletic play. So I don't know if I was necessarily mad at it so much as I was just like, I can't believe this is this is happening.
Yeah, at this point it was just a joke. It was just laughable. There's nothing you could do. Like, everything that could go wrong was going wrong, and that's exactly what this was. And everything for the Browns that could go right was going right. So, I mean, at that point, it's just laughable. Clearly, they didn't get any points off that, though. It didn't even really matter for them.
No, the Browns were able to move it to the Pittsburgh end of the field, but a holding penalty kind of killed the drive. And then the Browns, who were basically in the same scenario, punted this time. And, the difference is they were up 28 points, so there's no reason to go for it on a 4th and 8 from the opponent's 39. And finally, the Steelers finally started putting things together, a long 6-minute drive. It saw a lot of different short passes, a couple of bigger plays to James Washington, who really heated up on the drive. He had, I believe, 4 or 5 grabs, including 3 in a row for a total of, 50 yards, something like that. And it culminated with a short yardage situation. The Steelers got to the Browns 11, and then it was a 3rd and 1 at the 2-yard line, and that ended up being a 4th and 1, and you were just like, oh my goodness. And from the 2-yard line, James Conner can't score, but he gets the first down. It was like this team is just going to pull teeth getting this first touchdown, aren't they? And the Steelers ended up costing themselves the 2-minute warning, which ultimately could have cost them 7 points at the end of the half. And, it was the first touchdown drive of the game, so I was happy about it, but it was just like, my God, the short yardage for this team is just killing them, and it costs them a possible chance of getting the ball back with more time. And, that's just the biggest issue with this team all year has been short yardage, and it flared up once again, even though James Conner scored.
Yeah. Yeah, they were able to capitalize, but it was still, like you said, it was pulling teeth. You still had to see we struggled in short yardage. We couldn't get a 3rd and 1, and then it's like 4th and 1. Like, at that point, I'm like, yeah, we're totally going to get stopped. There's no way we can get this. This game is going. Surprisingly, we did. And then James Conner scored the touchdown on the very next play on 1st and goal, but still, it was the first showing from the offense. It actually was, other than that short yard situation, a pretty good drive. It's an 89-yard drive, so it was basically as good as we could have hoped for at this point in the game, where you're down already 28-0 with very little time left in the second quarter. I'm pretty sure it was 5 minutes left? 7:20. 7 minutes and 20 seconds left in the second, and you're down 28-0. So, it was the best thing we saw from this game so far at that point.
And as we've seen, a number of times over the past 3 years, Austin, the offense finally starting to wake up, starting to put together a little momentum. You just need your defense to come out and come up with the stop, and they cannot do it again. The Browns march right down the field, running, passing, whatever they want, like you said, and they go right down the field, taking taking both of their last 2 timeouts, and Austin Hooper's wide open for a touchdown. And all that hard work from the Steelers offense feels like it's for nothing, and the Browns go down and make it a 35-7 game, and you're just like, it's just not going to happen, because the Steelers defense could not come up with a single play as the offense was starting to turn it around. If they were going to, it felt like it would have been right there. So you just, again, one unit finally starts to rise to the occasion a little bit, but it's a team effort, and the defense couldn't come up with a single play. All in all, Austin, I need to go through and see if there were how many plays that there were no gain for on the ground. But if you want to talk about negative plays, turnovers, sacks, tackles for loss, there were a total of 2 on the day. That is it.
Yeah. It's not good enough. That's really what it was. No big plays from the defense, just not good enough. And I was so mad on that 3rd and 6, where Baker Mayfield scrambled for the first down, where Terrell Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick couldn't stop him short, because at that point, Pittsburgh took its first timeout. It was 1 minute and 32 seconds left. Baker Mayfield throws a pass left to Rashard Higgins, and it was incomplete. So now you're 3rd and 6 with a minute and 28 left. You let Baker Mayfield sit, and then roll out, and then you have 2 guys there. 2 guys. One can come downfield and get to him, and they're able to just let him get the first down and then let the drive continue, and then they never had a problem again in that drive. That was it. They never had another 3rd down. on that drive after that because they were just able to push around. It was just so bad.
So overall, the defensive performance, real quick, equating it to the Jacksonville Jaguars playoff game from 3 years ago, the most recent playoff game prior to this one. If you want to include quarterback hits, that Steelers defense that day had 3 negative plays, a tackle for loss and 2 quarterback hits, if you even want to count that. And this defense had 2, just 2 tackles for loss, no quarterback hits. So very similar in terms of defensive profiling. Both games, a Steelers franchise record in terms of points allowed in a playoff game. I mentioned this game felt like Super Bowl 48. It also really felt like the Steelers playoff game against the Jaguars, too. And it was just a disaster. It really was. And even though the Steelers went down the field and kicked a field goal, you just didn't feel like, you just knew the Steelers, unless if they really played differently coming out of the second half, they weren't going to have a chance.
Yeah, they cut the score to 25 points, 25 differential, but giving up that touchdown at the end was killer because any momentum they would have gained. And, I mean, honestly, I was happy they even got that field goal. I really thought that based on that punt earlier that we wouldn't even try and drive down the field with 2 timeouts and 34 seconds left, starting at Pittsburgh's 27? Yeah, Pittsburgh's 27. I didn't think we were going to even try because I was like, at that point, I was like, yeah, Mike Tomlin lives in his shoes. We're not going to drive downfield. What if we throw an interception? That's probably what's going through his head. But we did it, and
I was just going to say we've seen that a number of times this year, including I think just even the Browns game the previous week, where even with time left they'll just run the ball.
Yeah, I guess that's a good thing. I guess you realize, oh yeah, I'm down 28 points. What do I have to lose? But there's no consistency. The consistency is really bad because I just expected them to not go for it. And I'm glad they did. I'm not complaining about that. I'm glad they got the 3 points. It almost helped the comeback, but it was still not enough.
It really just makes you wonder, because I'm not one of those guys that likes to be a slave to the analytics, but I think there's a difference. There's a happy medium where Mike Tomlin wants to be that could exist between normal, slave to analytics and just going with your gut. I think there's a happy medium there, but Tomlin just goes with his gut. And it depends how he feels, and the way he feels is no longer consistent like it was early in his career. The way he would coach early in his career, you knew that he was aggressive, you knew the way that he was going to coach most of the time. The last few years, that's changed. And with that comes extremely inconsistent decision-making. And it burned the Steelers in the Jaguars game, and it burned them here. And it's just been one of those things that's been extremely frustrating, but that was an instance where he finally made the right decision, and you just weren't even sure that he was going to do that. But to open up the second half, the Browns were forced to punt near midfield. The Steelers, on a long field again, were able to go right down the field and score a touchdown. 2-point conversion was no good, but the Steelers finally got the ball back and got a nice long touchdown drive. The Browns go 3 and out, and then the Steelers go right down the field again. And they score another touchdown. This one a pass to Juju Smith-Schuster. Could have gone for the 2-point conversion again, but instead they kicked the field goal. So it's a 12-point game. And after those back-to-back touchdown drives, where the Steelers had gotten 2 touchdowns, forced the Browns to go 3 and out, they again get the Browns to go 3 and out. So the Steelers get the ball back with a minute to go in the third quarter. I was really feeling like, for the first time, at this point, I was like, if the Steelers score a touchdown on this upcoming drive, I think they will win. That was where I was at. I was like, I think they will. I don't know that they will, but I think if they can cut that deficit to 5, I think they'll win.
I agree. I think I tweeted it out. Oh, no, I actually deleted it because I didn't want to jinx it, but it didn't matter. But if the Steelers scored here, it felt like they were going to win. It was going to be 35-30. If they scored, and it was going to be, and there's tons of time left. It was literally the fourth quarter had just started when halfway through this drive, so there was tons of time left. I really thought that the momentum had fully swung into the Steelers' side of the court, and they decided to nuke it. They decided to nuke their momentum.
Yeah, so on those drives, we saw a lot of Ben Roethlisberger passing, a few nice passes, spreading the ball out like we've seen all year. More intermediate throws than we've been used to seeing all year. And the second touchdown to Juju, by the way, was a fantastic catch by Smith-Schuster, draped in coverage, and he was able to come up with it. And again, the Browns went 3 and out. And the Steelers were moving the ball a little bit. They had gotten the ball down to make it a 4th and 1 at the exact start of the fourth quarter, actually, as you mentioned. So they were at their own 46-yard line, down by 12 points. And I will point out at the time, I thought that punting wasn't the worst idea. But like I said earlier, I was wrong to think that, and I know that results bias plays in. But again, I was thinking with the mindset of you have plenty of time, and I was thinking about the way the defense had played the last couple drives. But the way you look at those 2 drives beforehand is that the Browns had basically just shot themselves in the foot. They missed a short pass, 2 short passes on the first drive and had a 2-yard run. And on the second drive, the most recent drive, the Browns went run, pass, and it was an incomplete pass. So I felt like the Browns did more to shoot themselves in the foot on those 2 drives than the Steelers did to stop them or anything. So the way I looked at it at that point was just the Steelers' defense, even though it had played better, I didn't have the full context of everything. And again, 1 yard, Mike Tomlin said earlier this year, if you can't get a yard, you don't deserve to win the game. Maybe it'd be another thing if you were on your own 5-yard line, but the fact of the matter is, you were near midfield. If you get a first down there, I feel pretty good about the Steelers at least getting 3 points. I don't know why you'd take 3 points, but you could at least set yourself up to be in good position there. And on top of that, for some reason, the Steelers run their punt team on there and try to draw the Browns offside with their punt team. If you're going to do that, why not go with the grizzled veteran quarterback who's been good at getting guys to jump over the course of the last 5 years? I don't understand the point of that. And then on top of that, Jordan Berry blasts the ball into the end zone 60 yards down the field, and the Steelers barely get anything good out of it because the whole idea, Mike Tomlin said, was to get good field position, but they ended up getting the ball at their own 20. So who cares? It was just a complete waste, and it was another exclusive example of Mike Tomlin living in his fears. Just so frustrating.
I knew as soon as I saw the punt, I knew it was the worst decision. It was what's it called? When, like, literally the whole idea was you had to get that. If you're going to punt that punt needs to go inside the 20. It needs to go inside really the 15 or the 10. And you need to, that's literally that. I personally think on that 4th and
Hello there? I think we might have lost you, Austin. All right, Austin, we got you back. Feel free to continue to talk about that situation with the living in your fears punt when you're down 12 near midfield, if you'd want to comment again.
Yeah, that punt was surrendering. You had all the momentum in the world. You look at the past 2 drives, the offense was making their way downfield. They were doing whatever they wanted with the Browns' defense. This is the perfect time to go for it and not nuke your momentum. Punting nukes your momentum. Even if you don't get it, there's at least you could say that you tried. There is time left, but with how the offense has been moving, with how the game has been playing, you don't know how much more the defense is going to hold. You pointed out, the defense was more than lucky on the other two drives on offense. The Steelers needed to score to stay in this. At least get 3 points. Cut it to a 9-point game. Doesn't really change super much, but it keeps momentum in your favor. And that's the biggest thing. Keeping momentum, for me, was the biggest thing. This would have been the perfect time to bring out the quarterback sneak. You hadn't run it all year. Tall quarterback. Would be surprised. Teams aren't ready for it. A high success play, and they choose not to. The Steelers did not run a quarterback sneak the entire year. And it would have been the perfect time for it. And then on top of things, that punt was awful. and you had one job. You're doing that punt. Has to go inside the 20. This punt has to be worth it. This punt has to be the greatest punt of your life. I don't expect it at the 5-yard line. Obviously, that if best to make it a punt would be if the punt was downed at the 1. It got touched back. It wasn't even close. It was like he might have been going for that, but it wasn't even close. That ball needed to be down within the 20 or likely within the 15 to make that anywhere close to worth it, and it didn't. It got a touchback, and the Browns were immediately able to go down the field, and they nuked their momentum. It was over from there. It was just bad. I mean, I guess I can't say it was over from there. They got a touchdown on their next offensive drive, and a 4-play drive was really quick. It was at that point, because the Browns were able to get back into the game, get a touchdown on a immediate quick 2-minute drive. It was over.
And it's a little different if it's the second quarter as opposed to the start of the fourth. Time is not your friend there. And I know the Steelers have reasons to be afraid of their short yardage offense, but whatever happened to the Chase Claypool jet sweep? What happened to the inside shovel pass? We hadn't seen any of those. The Steelers just run up the gut and get stuffed. Like, there's got to be some sense of urgency there, and for some reason, again, that was just the worst possible situation, the worst possible thing that could have happened. And the defense gets 80 yards, and you just need them to make one more stop, even if they give up some yardage, and instead they go right down the field, like you said, in 2 minutes, gains of 8, 17, 14, and then an embarrassing 40 yards screen pass to Nick Chubb where he's barely even touched. In fact, I don't even think he was touched. And all of a sudden it's 42-23, and it's like no matter what happens then, it's not going to matter. The Steelers go down the field, get a touchdown with Chase Claypool, no 2-point conversion. It's just like they're out of time. The Browns then go down the field again. They don't score a touchdown, but they take a ton of time off the clock, kick a field goal, and then that's where the game pretty much ends. Ben Roethlisberger desperation drive, doesn't see Sion Taki dropping back into the zone, and he gets picked off for maybe the worst interception of the day. The Browns turn that into 3 more points, and now it's just garbage time. Steelers go down the field, score a meaningless touchdown, and another onside kick gets recovered by the Browns, and that's it. And it's just, what an ugly, ugly situation. And I don't know. I guess maybe now we can talk a little big picture. The last 10 years, a 3-6 playoff record. And in terms of a coach who's been there 14 years, I think you can allow for 1 or 2 stinker playoff games like the Jaguars game, like the Tebow game. But now we've had 3 of those games in the last decade, and 2 of them in their last 2 playoff games. Another first-round exit with a team that was supposed to be the Steelers' last best chance to win a Super Bowl, and they got absolutely steamrolled by a team that they had owned for the better part of 25 years. A team that had won 1 time in your stadium's history that's been open for 20 years. Absolutely inexcusable. And it starts at the top with Mike Tomlin, starts with Ben Roethlisberger, Marquise Pouncey, and it trickles down to everybody. One of, if not the worst playoff performance I have ever seen from a Steelers team. And that's really saying something given the insane playoff disappointments we've seen.
And it's true. They were the worst 11-0 team of all time. It's good to be an 11-0, but they were the worst 11-0 team ever. 100%.
The way this team played in the first couple months of the season, really up to that first Baltimore game, I think there were a lot of great things that we saw, but I don't know if you want to attribute it to the Steelers getting stubborn, other teams catching on, probably a little bit of everything. But this team's momentum slowed down, and then once the offense kind of got into this rhythm where, okay, we can only move the ball with the short passing game, it's like everything worked so well for the first 3-4 weeks they did it. It just took them so long to adjust. And the slow starts never got figured out. And then defensively, the injuries piled up, and then, I don't even know what to say. The last few years, the defense has been really good, but in their last 2 playoff games have been awful. I mean, what do you make of that? I think if you want to talk big picture, we should be pretty close to the Steelers making wholesale changes and trying to start over, but the contract situations makes things interesting. I think that you need to make at least some changes, because this is the 3rd or maybe even 4th straight year the Steelers have collapsed, if you want to look at the Jaguars game as a collapse, but you just can't do it. That Jaguars debacle, followed by a 7-2-1 team that finished 9-6-1, an 8-5 team that finished 8-8, 11-0 team that finished 12-4 and one and done in the playoffs. I mean, you have to make changes. It's like Mike Tomlin said on his postseason press conference. You know, the definition of insanity. You have to do something different, and I can't believe that it's taken this many times for there to not be major change.
December used to be the Steelers' month too. The Steelers used to be closers. It used to be they finished strong, and just the past 3 seasons, it's just been awful. Just awful watching the closing month of the NFL season to get into the playoffs. It used to be where the Steelers thrived. I don't know what changed. I don't know what happened.
This year, I'd be willing to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt just because the Steelers were one of the teams in better position with COVID and no practice time, returning a ton of starters. So it made sense that they performed well out of the gate. But this team just has no idea how to start quickly in games. They're awful at starting fast. And too often they're inconsistent with their adjustments throughout a game, throughout a season. And their inability to adjust, I think, hurt them in the end. And I don't know where you start with Mike Tomlin, but is it an issue of Mike Tomlin has changed too much, or has he not changed enough? I mean, we won't know, obviously, we don't know exact details, but what I do know is that we've talked about this at length already, is that the way Mike Tomlin has coached his teams and his decision-making has changed, and that changing, I think, has had a big impact.
100%. 100% that there's not been adaptation, at least at some level. I feel like some changes need to happen, and I think we saw some so far happen going into this offseason, but honestly, there needs to be a lot of change with personnel and everything.
And processes, like the way things are done internally, stuff that we don't see, stuff that's behind the scenes. It can't just be a status quo thing, and Mike Tomlin said it wouldn't be. But frankly, I don't know that I believe him, because he's been talking a lot throughout his career, and he backed up his talk with action for the first, 5 to 8 to 10 years of his coaching career, but now the last handful of years, that's gone away. And actions speak louder than words. And I tweeted, and I know you saw the tweet because you liked it, in response to Tomlin's quote about we won't continue with the status quo, blah, blah, blah. And I said it's time for less talk and more action. And I'm serious about that. If this team is going to be more than a team that gets to one AFC championship game in a decade, it's going to require change. It's going to require being uncomfortable. And too often Mike Tomlin has let down the Steelers in that instance. And so is the rest of the Steelers' players in terms of execution. But it starts with Tomlin, and I've been a huge supporter of his throughout the years. But, I can't defend this. Like I said, I think you might be allowed to have 1, maybe 2 playoff clunkers in a 10-year span when you've been coaching this long. You can't have 3, certainly not in back-to-back playoff appearances. I got to be honest, if I were Art Rooney, I'd have probably let Mike Tomlin go, because I think sometimes, I think it's great that the Steelers hang on to their coaches and they give them a chance to work things out. I think it's they've been proven that that's a good way to go about their business. But I also think that, Austin, you can agree or disagree with me, but I think that sometimes there can be a happy medium between the way the Steelers conduct business, 3 coaches in 50 years, and, the way the Browns do their business, 3 coaches in 4 years. I think there's a happy medium there.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been spoiled. We've never had a losing season really since before 2004. It's been a really, really good time since then. It's been a good 15, 16 years, 17. Sometimes just enough isn't enough. If you're just barely good every year, you're 8-8. That's nice. It's nice to never have a losing season, but sometimes maybe you do need to just blow it up and just be bad. That's kind of what I'm hoping for next season. I'm hoping that Steelers are bad and then could return the year after and be competitive. It'd be a quick turnaround because usually once you're bad for more than one season. But I think that you could have made an argument to move on from Tomlin. You look at what other teams did. The Eagles moved on from Doug Peterson. He is 4 years off of a Super Bowl. It's not the same, but the Seahawks, their offense was killer this year. Their offense has been killer for years. They moved on from their offensive coordinator because he had a really bad second half of the year because that wasn't acceptable to them. That beat Brian Schottenheimer. Teams do this. It's sometimes having standards where just enough isn't enough is good. Like I don't really know where I stand. I feel like if the Steelers are blowing it up, they could get rid of Tomlin. I'm okay with keeping Tomlin for now, but it's just you can go either way. I kind of feel like I want the Steelers to just blow it up and try and change something. So get away from the status quo. Get away from just good enough.
I mean, it really is all moot just because we know that they're not going to. But I mean, the fact that I'll draw a comparison, and I know it's a little different because hockey and football are different. But my favorite hockey team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, were in kind of a similar situation back in the mid 20-teens, about 5 years ago. They had won their first Stanley Cup with their core in 2009 with a coach that they had brought on mid-season after a firing. And his name was Dan Bylsma. He was a solid coach, I thought, kind of like a players-oriented coach. And the Penguins would have really great regular seasons for the next 5 years. But they'd always end up getting upset in the playoffs. They'd have disappointing performances. They got swept in the 2013 conference final, and they scored 2 goals in that series. And even though the teams were still really good, they only made one conference final appearance with 2 of the best players in the entire league at their physical best. And sometimes, even though you might not want to, you have to make change. And the Penguins did, and sometimes it's not even the right change. They made a coaching change. He lasted a year and a half, and they made another change at coach. And that change ended up being the right one. They won 2 straight championships, and they maximized their window, even though their players at that time were starting to decline. Sometimes change for the sake of change is a good thing, and I think that's where the Steelers kind of are right now. I'm not saying the Steelers can't change with their current coaching staff, but I have my doubts just because I don't think that they are going to do enough soul-searching, enough self-analysis to be able to make those kinds of changes. I'm skeptical to say the least, and we can talk about some of those changes now. Guys like Randy Fichtner, the offensive coordinator, Sean Sarrett, the offensive line coach, and Tom Bradley, one of the DB's coaches, they were all let go. And tight end coach James Daniel, who's been with the team for a long time, he retired. So there's some changes there. But I think the big thing was that offensive coordinator. If you want to see real change, I think you have to bring in a guy like a Doug Peterson or someone like a Jim Caldwell, someone that has more of an analytics background, someone that has been shown to have more offensive success in today's modern NFL. And instead, we're having a guy like Matt Canada, who, don't get me wrong, I like Matt Canada, but I have my doubts as to whether or not he'll actually be able to implement what we saw earlier in the season, or if Ben Roethlisberger, who is apparently going to come back, is going to just end up wanting to do his own thing. If he's just going to be a mouthpiece, then it isn't change. It's just another person acting as a figurehead. If it is change, then maybe that's something else we can talk about. But suffice it to say, I have my doubts about whether or not there's actually going to be change.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Matt Canada was brought internal. It's not out of the Steelers, so see if he brings something else to the table. The jet sweeps and stuff were definitely his idea into this year. And I had a weird thought that I really wish someone would ask. It's probably wrong, but I feel like in Week 17 against the Browns, the backups, he was given a chance to call the plays. I've gotten a growing conspiracy theory that he was allowed in Week 17 to call plays. Because I started thinking, I was like, the Josh Dobbs stuff doesn't feel like Randy Fichtner, or didn't feel like that at all. And the offense was actually really good in that game. And I was like, I really feel like, because what did they have to lose? If they're playing backups, they can play backup coaches to see what they have as well. I mean, I'm probably wrong because it's more of a conspiracy theory than anything with any fact. but I feel like Canada might have been given the chance to call plays in that game. But again, just conspiracy theory at this point. But
well, I don't think
we'll see.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he had more of an influence as far as the game plan goes in that game.
Yeah, I feel like he definitely had influence. And I mean, bringing on the jet sweeps and stuff early on in the year was 100% him. We'll see if he brought anything new. I mean, he was only with the Steelers for 1 year, so maybe it'll be like having a fresh new. It's not like he's been with the Steelers and he got elevated after a long time. I'm hoping that he brings something fresh to the table and doesn't get pushed over because he's a young coach that doesn't have much NFL experience, and he's going with a guy that's in his last year that's a seasoned veteran. I'm hoping for the best here. I'm hoping the Steelers made that the best decision, but again, I don't know if I trust them that they did.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is that early in the year, like you said, there was evidence that we saw some of these changes, and we were seeing the jet sweeps from Chase Claypool. We saw Ray McCloud. I think the best instance of the modern offense was what we saw in the Eagles game. I think that was the Steelers' offense at its peak. I know that it was a lot of Chase Claypool, but wouldn't you agree that from weeks like 3 through like 6, through that Titans game, we saw the best instance of what a Ben Roethlisberger offense coinciding with the Matt Canada style could be? Like, it can exist.
100%. It 100% can exist together, and it could flourish. I mean, for a while, the Steelers had 25 plus points in all their games. And it was they were doing really well with their offense. It's just the end of the year collapsed. The point is, Matt Canada's offense can exist, and the one thing I have hope for is that Matt Canada was actually desired. Like the Miami Dolphins brought him in for an interview to be the offensive coordinator before he got elevated to Pittsburgh's offensive coordinator. So there is hope because apparently these other teams see something in him. It's not very often I feel like these coaches get interviews. Mike Tomlin has a very non-existent coaching tree, which a lot of people covet. But so it was kind of interesting in that, and that gives me a little bit of hope as well that other teams see value in Matt Canada.
Yeah, and it's why I'm not necessarily discounting his ability as a coordinator. I just have my doubts that he's going to be incorporated the way that he should be. Like if Canada's with the team for a couple of years, the way I see it is, okay, are we going to see what we saw the first half of this season, or are we just going to see him basically concede to what Ben wants, or are we going to see them work together and maybe not like it, and it'll kind of be a shaky kind of marriage for a year, and then when Ben is gone, they bring in a guy who can run the offense? I don't know. Like, I don't know how it's going to work. I have my doubts, but I'm at least willing to give it a chance, I guess is what I'm going to say. I have preferred someone out of house, but I can live with it as long as the Steelers attempt to incorporate what we saw early in the season into their offense this upcoming season.
We'll have to see. I mean, next year I'm basically counting as an off year. Steelers are never going to not be competitive. They're always going to be competitive. But next year I have very low expectations for the team with the talent they're losing. And sorry to cut into this one. I'm hoping we could do an episode next talking about free agents and
absolutely
talking about what we view as like the highest thing we need in the draft, like all together in one episode.
An off-season primer.
Yeah, getting ready for the offseason, talking about what the Steelers have to do, who's leaving, who's likely not coming back, who might come back,
and what
position we need.
And we can get into talks about, guys like Marquise Pouncey. We'll talk a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger right now, just because I wanted to bring up the point, like going forward next year, the idea is if you're bringing him back, you still think you can compete at least for a playoff spot, yes? Because otherwise, what's the point in him coming back? I think
there's no point.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, let's be honest. Ben Roethlisberger physically, as we know, is in decline. He can still make some throws. He's not... The reason why the short passing game struggled is because Ben, for two reasons. Number one, Ben was unwilling to go downfield early in the year. He was a lot better the last couple games he played, but for too often during the year, he was just willing to only do the short passing game. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, he was being off the short passing game. He was game managing for the most part.
And he was inconsistent at times when he decided to, like that Bengals game. I just think for the most part, we didn't see him do it enough. I still think he can do it at a high enough level. Certainly physically speaking, I still think he's good enough to win because I always draw this comparison is Peyton Manning in his last season with the Denver Broncos, where physically he was at the end and he was, like, physically speaking, the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. He could still make some throws, but you knew that he was basically just putting everything he had into a ball that went 20 yards down the field.
Yeah, it's possible. That's just so tough, though, because that might have been the only team he could have done that with, because that team was built ridiculous. Like, everything around him was insane. The defense was nutty. The offense, the wide receivers, despite not being able to throw, were nutty. The offensive line was good enough, and just overall, like he had a really good team. I don't know if the Steelers have that same level of talent that he does. I mean, the defense might be there. The offense is a little bit more questionable with the offensive line, and the wide receivers are more questionable going forward. I like Claypool and I like Johnson. I like Washington going forward, but it's just I like it's way tougher. It's going to be way, way tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking kind of from a standpoint of if Ben, Ben is obviously, no one's mentally where Peyton Manning was that year. He could basically dissect hack defenses with his computerized mind. Ben Roethlisberger is certainly a good quarterback when it comes to pre-snap these days, but physically speaking, he's better than where Manning was there. Manning is the absolute low bar you have to clear in 2015. Where he is next year, I think he'll still be ahead of that. The question is, can you build a team around him that can compete enough? And I think defensively you're losing a lot of pieces, so that's a concern that we can talk about later on. And I think on top of that, you basically have to make sure that you have not just a competent running game, but a good one. And this was the worst running football team from the Steelers I've ever seen, bar none. And I've seen some bad running games from this team, but this one was by far the worst. After the game against, who am I thinking of here? The Browns. The first Browns game, when they went to Baltimore and Dallas, that was when the running game disappeared. And they actually ran the ball kind of well against the Browns in the last 2 weeks, but besides that, the running game was the worst I've ever seen.
I mean, they weren't really given a chance to run the ball against the Browns in the playoffs. I mean, being down 28-0 in the first quarter, it's basically the run game is out of the question, basically. But they had success. The successful run rate
was good. It was good.
The playoff game we just watched was incredible. Incredible. They didn't run many times. That might have been the one thing you could say their successful run rate was extremely high.
Yeah, absolutely.
For that, but yeah, it was collapse. I mean, you go from the only team to have a 100-yard rusher in their first 3 games to gone, and now you're 32nd in the league in rushing yards per game. To all that, below the Texans, the Texans have no offensive line, and they're running Duke Johnson and David Johnson. Like you really poorly. You did very, very, very poorly, and you fell all the way down.
So I think
really crazy. Not that you need. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, the one thing is that you don't need a run game, and that was just proven to me. I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but we just watched the Bills beat the Ravens, and you want to guess how many attempts that their running backs had, or just Devin Singletary had? He had 8. He had 8 attempts, and the Bills beat the socks off the Ravens. I mean, not in score-wise, but it felt like they controlled that game. Regardless, it's just you still want to be more balanced. It's not ideal to live not balanced. You can live that way. The Bills are living that way, but it's possible to deal with.
I think it's a little different, too, when you've got a 25-year-old quarterback and a soon-to-be 39-year-old quarterback, too. I think you can get away with a couple of games like that, but I think as we've seen, you can't live that way. It's different if you've got a guy like Josh Allen in his mid-20s versus Ben Roethlisberger approaching 40. You can have a couple games like that. I think you can't have 16 games like that next year.
No, you definitely need to rely on the run game at least a little bit more than that. You probably want to split it to help your 39-year-old quarterback 8-8.
So we'll talk more about it, but I think that there's obvious places to upgrade on offense, assuming Ben is coming back, and we'll talk more about that. But I think if you can get a better running game and a slight, at least upgrade the offensive line in terms of run blocking, you'll give your offense a chance, and then defensively, it's just about retaining some guys, and then I don't know where you want to talk about like positions to address, but I would think that cornerback is one that you want to look at, and then there's you're going to lose some guys, so you're going to need other guys to step up. So it'll be a tall task, but I wouldn't say it's impossible, but the odds are stacked against them right now.
Yeah. Honestly, it's going to be tough going into next year. They're going to remain competitive, but I really feel like next year's going to be like a 9-8, 8-9 year, depending on if it's a 7-game schedule. If it's not, it's like an 8-8 year, maybe 9-7.
Watch next year's the year
Like
they
that.
finished like 8-8, barely get in, and then get a playoff win on the road.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
So, all right. You have any further thoughts on this game?
I think we're good.
All right. Let's go. What else is going on? Did we hear what's going on with Terrell Austin?
And we didn't talk about that, but Terrell Austin got an interview with the Tennessee Titans to be their defensive coordinator. Nothing on that front to say that he got hired or not, but right now he got an interview to be their DC.
Steelers signed 15 different players to futures contracts, including Trey Edmonds, who was released because he was a restricted free agent. So the Steelers chose not to tender him because that would be more money than the futures minimum. Offensive tackle Jerron Jones, tight end Kevin Rader, receiver Anthony Johnson and Cody White, offensive lineman Brandon Walton, safety John Battle, linebacker T. Gray Scales, defensive lineman DeMarcus Christmas and Calvin Taylor, long snapper Christian Kuntz, defensive back Trevor Williams, punter Corliss Waitman, and offensive tackle John LeGlue. The Steelers have the 24th pick in the draft next year. Guys like Deion Kane and Devlin Hodges, were not retained on futures contracts. Keep in mind that's a two-way street, so it would require those guys signing it, and they probably felt they had better chances elsewhere to make an active roster next year.
Maybe same with Wendell Smallwood. I can't believe the Steelers weren't able to keep Wendell Smallwood after this entire year. After making him a protected player all year, they can't keep him. I don't understand.
I was ready for them to make him like a part-time player, assuming James Conner leaves in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. I really hope that Smallwood finds another team, and that's why he didn't get a futures contract. Because it's gonna be really dumb if he's just out of the NFL and the Steelers protected him for no reason this entire year.
Yeah, that would have been quite a mess, but a couple injuries coming out. Alex Highsmith suffered a high ankle sprain. He should be fine going into the next season. He tried to come back in the game for, I think, 3 plays, but it was evident he was not at full strength. So, on top of the Steelers' struggling run defense, we got to see some Cassius Marsh, and there was one play where Wyatt Teller was bearing down on Cassius Marsh like on a power, and I was like, good God, there's no chance for this poor man, and Marsh got absolutely walloped, and you just you felt bad for the guy. He got destroyed. And Mike Hilton had an ankle injury as well. Came back in the game. Not that it mattered because he was playing just as bad before the ankle injury too. So it's another guy likely leaving in free agency. There was no real indication from Mike Tomlin that any guys were dealing with significant injuries coming out of the season. Like we thought David DeCastro might, like Marquise Pouncey, who's been having that knee issue from last year. What do you think about that? If there's no outstanding injuries on those fronts, or Tyson Alualu's knee that he hasn't fully recovered from, makes you wonder if those guys are maybe just on the decline, especially DeCastro and Pouncey.
That's wild. With Pouncey, I thought he was going to need surgery, but if there's... Because I could have sworn that he said earlier in the year that he's playing on a bad knee and it needs to be repaired, and he chose not to for this season, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess. It's really sad. I'm really more David DeCastro. He went off. Joe was like a Pro Bowler, and now he's just another body. Like he's just a guy there.
Yeah,
this year.
I was more disappointed with him because with Pouncey, at least you could make the argument that he didn't play with. He played through needing surgery this year. He could theoretically do it again next year because it's a situation that it wouldn't get worse. But with DeCastro, it was like I thought that he was playing so much lower compared to where he normally does that I was like, all right, he's like almost assuredly going to need some sort of operation, and then the fact that he apparently doesn't makes you wonder if he really is just in decline.
Yeah, it's big sad. Big sad.
All right, as far as the rest of the playoffs go, you want to do kind of a quick hitter through the wild card round?
Sure.
So the Bills beat the Colts in a game that the Colts were really outplaying the Bills, but what was it? Something like the only team to ever lose a playoff game after having like 500 yards of offense and no turnovers.
Oh, wow, really? Didn't even hear that, so.
Something like that. I mean, the Colts played really well, but they had a couple of interesting coaching decisions that kind of bit them in the backside, missed a field goal. The Bills hung on to finally win a home playoff game, win their first playoff game since 1995, so that was big for them. The Los Angeles Rams upended the Seattle Seahawks, who we talked about. Their offense, having looked like it was on fire at the start of the year, disappeared in the second half, and Brian Schottenheimer got the axe. Any thoughts there?
I was just surprised that the Rams played so well without Cooper Kupp and with Jared Goff playing broken thumb with 3 pins in it, so that was surprising.
The legend of Taylor Heineke emerged following the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers escaped with an 8-point win. Heineke looked good. Has Washington maybe found their answer at quarterback?
I doubt it, but, I mean, he looked decent.
Yeah, it was just one game, so we'll see. The Ravens get some revenge over the Titans in a 10-point win. A comeback victory for Lamar Jackson. How about that?
I didn't know it was possible, but you know what? He did it. So, since win 2013.
Hey, it only happened against maybe the worst pass defense in the NFL.
Hey, man. You know what? Let them have it. We'll let them have it.
Everybody gets one.
Yeah.
Did you see the Nickelodeon broadcasts of Bears and Saints?
Saw some of it. I saw like the slime cast. I sat there wondering why they were comparing Alvin Kamara to Alvin and the Chipmunks, but you know what? I guess it appeals to the younger audience.
I was massively disappointed with the fact that we didn't get to hear from Mitchell Trubisky, who won the Nickelodeon MVP award.
He won the Nickelodeon MVP award?
As a matter of fact, he did. But they didn't want to shove a microphone in his face after they got eliminated.
I love that. I don't know how that happened, but I love it.
And then obviously the Steelers game. So how about the divisional round? The one that just concluded the other day, actually yesterday here as we're recording. Starting with the Packers and the Rams. Packers were just a more talented team. Aaron Donald playing through torn cartilage in his ribs. Tough break for the guy. But the Packers moving on.
Yeah, that wasn't a surprise. It's just the Rams were playing on borrowed money and borrowed time at that point.
One of my favorite scenes was watching the Bills win over the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens with an opportunity to go in, and I believe they had a chance to tie the game, and instead, Taron Johnson, the guy who picked off Ben Roethlisberger a couple months ago, takes a pick six from Lamar Jackson, second longest in NFL history, to the house, and the Bills hang on with a dominant defensive performance, and the Ravens are sent packing. The Bills in the AFC Championship game for the first time since 1993.
I'm rooting for the Bills here. I'm rooting for my man's Tyler Matakevich to get to win. And also, I think they're just a fun team to watch. So at this point, that's who I'm rooting for. What's it called? Yeah, pretty good defensive game. The Bills were able to kind of contain Lamar Jackson on the ground. I mean, he only rushed 9 times for 34 yards, and that's basically all it takes to win, because if you force Lamar Jackson to throw, you're not going to win. And then Lamar Jackson got hurt and then couldn't finish the game, so it didn't really matter. You had Tyler Huntley throwing passes to end the game, and that's definitely not going to win you the game.
I felt so bad for him. He had one chance, and he almost threw a wide-open touchdown that would have brought them back in the game. You knew that when he saw that guy wide open, that he just put everything he had into it, because he was like, I can't believe he's open, and he just let him a little too far.
that you do hate to see it. Well, I don't. I'm glad that the Ravens are eliminated, but
you feel bad. You feel bad for the kid.
Young guy.
You
feel bad for Huntley. Yes.
I was shocked that both RG3 and Trace McSorley were out. I forgot they were both injured.
Yep, both were hurt.
Speaking of quarterback injuries, Patrick Mahomes goes down as the Browns were trailing the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of, 19-3? Or it was 22-3, something like that. Or no, I think it was a 2-score game at the time. You get the feeling the Browns are going to come back. They get a touchdown, and then it's up to Chad Henne after he throwed an interception earlier, and they come out with a high percentage pass. Henne makes the play, and the Chiefs managed to survive the Browns, who showed that their win over Pittsburgh was not a fluke.
I mean, Browns were the worst rule in NFL way from winning this game. Like, literally, I hate the fumble through the end zone rule. I mean, I didn't want the Browns to win, but that rule sucks so bad. I hate that rule. And that's what it would have taken. It would have been a swing of 7 points for them, and they would have been up 24-22. But, it happens. It's one of the rules, and it sucks. And I pray one day that the NFL will realize, hey, let's not do it this way. Let's change how this rule works. But until then, I mean, Kansas City won and Cleveland lost, and I'm happy that Cleveland lost.
So now the story of Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game, certainly a question, seeing as how he might not play against the Bills next week. I know it's early, but how are you feeling about that game?
I feel like the Bills have been the best NFL team in the last quarter of the season. I think that the Bills are going to win it even if Patrick Mahomes plays. I mean, I think that they do better if Patrick Mahomes plays. I think that's obvious. Regardless, the Chiefs have just been, they've been riding on the skin of their teeth. The last quarter of the season, barely beating the Panthers, barely beating Broncos the second time, losing to Las Vegas. They've had a lot of close calls where they probably should have lost. Luck fell into their favor. I feel like they're running out of luck. And the Bills, again, have been the best team to close out the year, in my opinion. I think that the Bills come in and win. I know they were a little flat against the Ravens, but they have actually a really solid defense, in my opinion. I mean, they have 3 good corners. So when you have 3 good cornerbacks, that's really rare. I think that they're going to have a better time against the Chiefs defense than to have that good of defensive backs in the cornerback area. They have, obviously, Tyrann Mathieu, and I like Juan Thornhill, but I think that the Chiefs defense is easier than the Ravens defense for sure.
Yeah, I like the Bills either way at this point. I like you said, I think they've been the best team in the league for a number of weeks now. And like you said, you got that feeling that the Chiefs are kind of pushing their luck here, and eventually it could come back to bite them. But in the meantime, the last game of the week, we've got the Saints and Buccaneers. Drew Brees' career likely ending with a disappointing and dismal performance, a game where they had the lead and then shot themselves in the foot with 4 turnovers, and the Buccaneers advanced 30-20.
Yeah, honestly, Saints just didn't have it in them. Unfortunately, Drew Brees just wasn't the same this year, and it wasn't enough. Saints are another quick exit. I feel bad for them almost.
Yeah. Assuming Brees retires, that would make, along with Matt Schaub retiring, depending on if Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger comes back, that would make Ben the 3rd oldest quarterback in the league next season.
Yeah. Their playoff woes match the Steelers, if not worse, over there.
It's a little bit harder to stomach, too, I would think, because I think they've only won 1 Super Bowl with Brees, and they haven't been back. The Steelers with Ben have at least won twice and were 1 drive away at the end of Super Bowl 45 from a 3rd. So, I mean, they've had their chances more so than teams like that's what's amazing to me, comparing the Steelers to the Saints and the Packers. I think the Saints and Packers have had better overall teams around them than Ben Roethlisberger's had with the Steelers, and the Steelers have gotten more out of it. That's not to say the Steelers haven't had their own massive disappointments, because they have, but that's why I think this Super Bowl run was huge for guys like Brees, and it still is for Rodgers. I think it's massive for their legacies.
It could change on how they're ranked historical quarterbacks like Montana, Young, and all those guys.
But don't think this isn't disappointing for the Steelers. Remember, if the Steelers win Super Bowl 45, Ben Roethlisberger has the same amount of rings at that point as Tom Brady does. And he would have only played 7 seasons at that point. That means almost half of his seasons up to that point would have ended in Super Bowls. So there's plenty of reasons to still be upset.
That would have been crazy.
Still plenty of reasons to be upset, but I digress. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be the first team to benefit from the NFL's new hiring initiative rule. They will get 2 third-round compensatory picks in each of the next 2 drafts because they lost minority coaching talent Brad Holmes to the Lions as he was hired to be their general manager. So that's kind of interesting to note.
Yeah, it's a cool rule. I feel like it should do good. You know what I thought about, though? Might take away some jobs because say the Ravens have a minority coach that's really, really good. If you're the Steelers, then you have 2 guys, right? One's it's him for the Ravens or it's someone else from, I don't know, like Green Bay. You're not going to hire the Ravens guy because you're going to have in your head, I'm giving them 2 third-round picks. I'm doing this. That came into my head the other day. But other than that, I think the rule is pretty good. I don't think that's going to restrict a lot of people to make that move. I mean, you just saw an NFC team hiring the NFC team's coach. I mostly entered and stuff, like you'll see that happen, but I don't know how often that even happens.
Yeah, also Omar Khan was almost hired by a couple teams, the Texans and the Titans. And we can talk about the Texans in a minute here if you want.
We can talk about that.
All right. Well, actually, let's real quick mention the 7 head coaching vacancies. 5 of them have been filled. The Eagles are still looking for a coach after they released Doug Peterson. The New York Jets hired defensive coordinator of the 49ers, Robert Saleh. I like that hire. The Falcons hired Titans offensive coordinator Arthur Smith to be their head coach. I think that's a solid hire. The Jaguars signed Urban Meyer out of retirement to become their head coach. I think that's a bad hire. The Chargers hired Rams defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, which I thought was interesting. I don't know much about him. And the Lions are hiring Saints assistant head coach and tight ends coach Dan Campbell, which I think will be interesting.
The Rams double dipped. Not the Rams. The Lions double dipped in the Rams coaching staff and took Brad Holmes and they took Staley. So that was interesting from them. Yeah, just a bunch of moves. I think that a lot of these were a lot of promising places to go. I think the Jets and the Chargers were really, really alluring places for head coaches. Then the Texans are all going to the Texans. I don't like the Falcons. I think going for the Falcons are just in decline. Their players are all older. Best player right now is like Calvin Ridley. I feel like that was tough, but for Robert Saleh, he's got a lot to work with. There's cap space, there's draft capital. You got some leeway there, and then the Chargers are basically there. They got a quarterback. They don't necessarily have cap space, but they're not in hell, and they didn't trade away their draft capital, so that's a nice place to go. That now has a elite wide receiver. It has a quarterback, has some pretty good pieces on defense, and Derwin James back. The other ones are interesting. I'm always curious because it's a two-way street. A head coach has to decide that he wants to be with that team because they're ruining his year. And that's why I think the Texans are really struggling right now. No one wants to be with the Texans. I would not want to be a head coach for the Texans. I'm sure I could do a better job than Bill O'Brien did.
Yeah, what a mess. So Deshaun Watson is apparently really frustrated. That relationship with the team has been fractured because he was told that the team was going to be keeping in touch with him regarding the hiring of their new general manager, and he was not. And because of that, he's pissed off. And Texans legends, the 2 best Texans in team history, Andre Johnson and J.J. Watt, have basically echoed his sentiment and basically told him to stand his ground. And when you've got that kind of support, it's hard to think that the Texans are going to be in any position other than they're going to have to bend to his will, because he will not accept what they've done.
same from DeAndre Hopkins, same from Arian Foster, all have chimed in. Like, no one wants to be with the Texans, and it's just an awful situation. You're likely losing Watson, you're likely losing J.J. Watt, no one wants to be there. Just poorly run, and then on top of that, there's no cap space. You're coming off a bad draft class where your guys played, like, not a record low, but an NFL low snaps from rookies, partially because they didn't have draft picks last year. But you kind of have to hit. The Steelers didn't have a first-round draft pick, and they hit really well this year. The Texans did not. So now, no draft capital going forward, no caps going forward. You're coming off a unimpressive rookie class. Losing to Sean Watson, which I guess opens up cap space. It might fix one problem. Now you have a quarterback, so pick your pool. One of the best players you've ever had, because J.J. Watt's likely moving on. So I don't know who would want to be the head coach of the Texans. It's really rough. I'm surprised anyone would want to be the GM. It's just it's going to be the Texans are going in a very long rebuild, a very, very long one. The Texans could be bad for 10 years. They could be the new Jets. They could be the new
Browns.
Like it's going to be. They're just screwed everywhere. They're screwed everywhere, and no one wants to coach their team. So no, they're in a really bad spot.
There were one or two guys that I think Deshaun Watson was interested in. One of them being Omar Khan, the Steelers' cap management guy. And instead, what's his name, Caserio or Easterby? Or I think it's Easterby hired Caserio, if I'm not mistaken. His bud from New England. But if he had just stayed the course instead of hiring his buddy, maybe they'd still have a franchise quarterback that would be interested in playing for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. Everything's bad at Texans.
And make no mistake, they were a 4-12 team with him, but even if they have him, he covers up a decent amount of deficiencies, you know? Like, not having him is, like you said, starting over, and they have almost nothing to trade for as far as reacquiring draft capital. Excuse me. Unless they trade Watson himself.
It's just, they're screwed in every single facet. There's no reason to want to be a part of that team. I mean, this team has been a mess, really. I mean, their owner said that you don't let the inmates prison, and I feel like there's been a disconnect between the players and the ownership there, because like it was kind of messed up to say in the context he said it in. It makes you really not want to play for that guy. Then the Bill O'Brien becoming GM and head coach and treating DeAndre Hopkins and just making a load of moves that just were bad and didn't make sense in decisions. So much wrong with this team.
Yeah, indeed. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, that'll be all.
Alrighty then. We'll be back later to talk about the Steelers offseason. We'll start priming the Steelers offseason. So in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com, or check out our social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and our episodes are posted on SoundCloud and YouTube. You can find our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you for joining me, and we'll be back either later this week or sometime next week talking about how we think the Steelers offseason is going to look. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.